at the origins of the EU. Because, as it turns out, the origins of the EU include a number of facts that we haven't been told about. Firstly, to understand what I'm going to say next, we've got to go back in history a little way. And we go back to 1941. At this point, the Second World War was 2 years old, and the Nazi regime in Germany was maintaining several official institutes that had one purpose only. And this was to prepare the future economic and political shape of the world for a Nazi IG Farben victory in World War II. Now, IG Farben I'll say a little bit more about in a little while, but for now all you need to know is that IG Farben was a pharmaceutical and chemical cartel that had financed the rise of the Nazis and was deeply involved in the perpetration of World War II. One of the institutes that the Nazi regime was maintaining was something called the Central Research Institute for National Economic Order and Greater Sphere Economy. This was based in Dresden, in Germany. And the head of this office was this man you can see here, Arno Scholzer. In 1941, Scholzer summarised the Nazi cartel plans, the Nazi IG Farben plans, for a post-World War II Europe. In this book, you can see a copy of the cover here. What's interesting, ladies and gentlemen, about this book is that the parallels between the Europe that it describes and the Europe of today are quite amazing. 3 examples of modern-day EU concepts that are described in this book are the European Commission. For any of you who don't know, the European Commission is a 27-person executive body. It is the executive body of the European Union. None of the 27 members of the European Commission are elected. We don't get to choose who they are. They're all appointed. But they're still the executive body of Europe. The concept of the European Commission features prominently in Scholzer's book, as also does the system of EU directives. I talked earlier about a couple of these modern-day directives, the Food Supplements Directive and the Herbal Medicines Directive. Well, this system of EU directives, the idea that directives are produced primarily by the Commission and then handed down to the European member states to be implemented, this is also described in Scholzer's book. This was the system of government that the Nazis intended to impose on Europe had they won World War II. And finally, we have this other aspect, the finalisation of a master agreement, as Scholzer called it. And this was to govern the details of any ongoing changes to the system. Any ongoing legal changes, any ongoing legal agreements at the political and governmental level in Europe. The key point about this master agreement is that almost 60 years later, it took shape and form in what we now know as the Lisbon Treaty. I'll come to that again a bit later. But first, something else. Because there's plenty of other proof that the Nazis' intended post-war aims were very similar in terms of the structure they were proposing to what we have now. Further proof emerged during the Nuremberg war crimes trial against IG Farben. After the Second World War, there were a number with war crimes tribunals held in Nuremberg. The sixth one involved IG Farben specifically. The managers and directors of IG Farben were held to account for war crimes committed by them. This man here is Fritz Tamiya, and during the trial against Farben, in which he figured prominently, he was a senior director of Farben. During the trial, his lawyer, his legal counsel, Dr. Berndt, specifically stated that the concept of a total European economic area had shaped his client's aims. So what he was saying was that essentially it was a very flimsy defence. He was saying that, well, yes, Your Honour, my client stands accused of some heinous crimes, but his aims were honourable. His aims were to bring about the creation of a total European economic area. The Nazi plans for Europe were about economics. They're about profits. They're about expanding the markets for IG Farben, the emerging markets in pharmaceuticals, chemicals and petrochemicals. They were not about a Europe of the people. Which, in fact, if one considers it, it's a similar situation to what we have now. Tamiya had been responsible for the construction and operation of the IG Farben factory at the Auschwitz Concentration camp. He was, at the end of the trial, he was found guilty of plunder, spoliation, slavery and mass murder. And he was condemned by the Nuremberg court to 7 years in prison. Not much, really, for a man found guilty of crimes such as those. But despite these crimes, he was released after serving only 2 years. And in 1956, despite knowing that he was a convicted war criminal, the drug company Bayer appointed him as the chief of its supervisory board, and he held this post for 8 years. But there's more, ladies and gentlemen, because the evidence that we have about the origins of the European Union being different to those that we've been told about, the evidence goes much deeper than this, because there are things that the EU does not want you to know about its first president. This man is Walter Hallstein. He was the founding president of the European Commission. He was a key architect of the European Union. What we know is that Hallstein, before and during World War II, was a member of official Nazi organisations. One of them, the Association of National Socialist German Lawyers, was founded in 1933, immediately after the Nazis had assumed power. 3 years later, it was converted to the notorious Nazi Association of Law Protectors, as it was called. Now, membership of this second association was restricted solely to those individuals who showed uncompromising support, total support for the Nazi ideals and Nazi ideology. Well, ladies and gentlemen, Hallstein was a member of both these organisations. We know this because we found a copy. After searching through international archives, we found a copy of a memorandum sent by Hallstein to the representative of the Nazi government at the University of Rostock in Germany in 1935. You can see it here. Use an English translation there on the right. So we know, in his own words, that he's a member of these organisations. But there's much more, because in searching through these archives, we found other evidence that was even more shocking than this. And in 1939, he gave a speech in Rostock, which we call his conquest speech, because this was given just before the outbreak of World War II. And this speech, I promise you, will change your ideas, your perspective, your understanding of the EU forever. A key aspect of the speech concerned what Hallstein This leading he described as the link-up between Austria and large parts of what used to be known as Czechoslovakia with Germany. Because rather than referring to these territories as having been conquered and seized with bloodshed, he described their seizing as being part of what he called the creation of the greater German Reich and the legal Germanization of the new territories. The legal, get that, the legal Germanization of the new territories. Because to Hallstein, the war, the expanding of Germany's borders, was an economic event. We'll see more of this in a moment. But to Hallstein was a lawyer, by the way. He was a senior lawyer. He'd also participated in discussions between Hitler and Mussolini in Italy. And to Hallstein, this was a legal issue. The expansion of Germany's borders, to him, was simply claiming what he thought belonged to Germany by rights. But interestingly, he specifically stated that the failure to create what he called a unified legal system for Greater Germany, meaning expanded Germany, was one of the unfinished tasks and failures of the Second German Reich. Now, the Second German Reich covers that period from the end of the 19th century through the beginning of the 20th century, leading up to the First World War. So he was saying that one of the unfinished tasks and failures of that Reich was the failure to create a unified legal system for the expanded borders Germany had taken. Interestingly, he also described the legal process in Greater Germany for the creation of a unified legal system as being the issuing of directives. So this ties in with what we saw in Arno Scholte's book, where the system of directives was expanded upon at some length. So we know that it wasn't just Scholte saying this. Hallstein was aware of this, and he included a whole section on this in this speech. And of course, subsequently, when he became the founding president of the EU, he incorporated this dictatorial system of lawmaking into the treaties that founded the EU. But also, revealingly, given that the rise of the Nazis, as I said before, and the preparations for World War II had been financed by the IG Farben Pharmaceutical and Chemical Cartel, he described the creation of the Greater German Reich as being an economic event, he said, of sheer, unimaginable consequences. I guess, as I always say, if you look at the last part, well, he was right about that, because the consequences of World War II were certainly sheer and unimaginable. But the first part, the creation of the Greater German Reich, an economic event. Again, this ties in with what Fritz Tamir's attorney said at Nuremberg in the trial, that his client's aim was the creation of a total European economic area. Again, Hallstein did not see the expanding of Germany's borders, the seizing of other countries, Austria, Czechoslovakia. He did not see this as a crime. It was an economic event. But perhaps the most shocking part of all of this speech was that Hallstein specifically stated that one of the most important laws to be produced in the invaded and seized countries, the annexed countries, as they're called, was the law for the protection of the German blood and the German honour. In other words, he advocated the imposition of the Nuremberg racial laws as a top priority in those countries. Now, for anybody who doesn't know, the Nuremberg racial laws specifically excluded German Jews from having Reich citizenship. And they prohibited them from marrying or even having sexual relations with German people or people with German blood. Shocking, really, that this man could have an ideology such as this and become the first president of the European Union? I'm sure you're asking yourself, well, where is the evidence for these claims? Well, we have evidence, ladies and gentlemen. In the same international archives that we found the memorandum that I showed you earlier, we found Hallstein's handwritten notes for this speech. You can see an example of one of the pages here. The others are available on our website. Not just that, we have a copy of a newspaper article published in Rostock the following day. An eyewitness report, it was published January 24th, the following day. It describes how the attendees included the entire Nazi elite of the region. It confirms the date of the speech. It confirms the title of the speech. We also have a copy of the official invitation to the event, confirming the date of the speech, the title of the speech, the venue of the speech. So we know that Hallstein said these things. Hallstein achieved a notoriety, in fact. He was seen as a loyal Nazi for saying these things. The question then we have to ask ourselves is this: it's how did this man come to sign the Treaties of Rome? The Treaties of Rome were the treaties that created the European Union. We see him sitting there with a pen in his hand, poised to change Europe at the stroke of a pen. How could a man with these beliefs, these ideologies, end up as the founding president and chief architect of the European Union? I would put it to you that he could only end up in this position if he had support from the parties who would benefit the most from this, the cartels that fought World War II, that financed the rise of the Nazis, and people at the political level who wanted this to come about. It's impossible at the time for a man with Hallstein's background to have hidden his background to a sufficient degree that nobody would know about this. That's not possible. I mentioned the Lisbon Treaty earlier. I mentioned this because it's referred to as the Master Agreement in Arno Scholter's book in 1941. Again, it turns out that there are things about the Lisbon Treaty that we haven't been told about. This was passed a couple of years ago. It was signed in 2007, and it became law throughout all 27 European Union countries 2 years later. It's divided into two parts. There's the Treaty on European Union, and the second part is the Treaty on the Functioning of the European Union. And then after that, at the very end, which most people don't really read, there's a bunch of stuff at the end called protocols. Well, as we'll see in a moment, these include some of the most interesting stuff of all. But what the Lisbon Treaty did, it established the laws of the EU as having primacy over national laws. After Lisbon, the laws of Romania are secondary to the laws coming to Romania via the European Union. The same is the case for my country, the same is the case for all member countries of the European Union. But there is a shocking fact about this treaty, that even throughout all of the arguments and negotiations that took place during the period leading up to it being passed, there's one fact, certainly in my country, I'm not aware in Netherlands or Germany, countries where we work a lot, I'm not aware of this ever being reported upon. And it's this, is that the Lisbon Treaty places the EU above the law. I mentioned a moment ago about the protocols. At the end of the treaty there's this bunch of little stuff that's stuck on the end. One of these is called the Protocol on the Privileges and Immunities of the European Union. And what it does, it makes the EU premises and buildings exempt from search. It doesn't matter whether we, the people, believe there has been crimes against the people committed there. It doesn't matter whether we believe that we are subject to a dictatorial, non-democratic style of government. It doesn't matter whether we believe that these people are placing industrial cartels and their interests before our interests. It doesn't matter. We have no means of lodging our belief that there's been a crime committed and no means of having the buildings searched. Not just that. Members of the European Commission, the unelected Commission I mentioned earlier, are immune from legal proceedings in respect of acts performed by them in their official capacity, including their words written or spoken. And they enjoy this immunity even after they have ceased to hold office. Think about that. If you have a body, an executive body, at the head of a political bloc that are not elected by anybody, and they are immune from legal proceedings being brought against them in respect of what they do and say while carrying out their job, and that this immunity continues even after they cease to hold office. The only way you can describe such a body is as a dictatorship. What other evidence do we need to label this as a system of dictatorship? They're not elected and they're above the law. That's it. And we know this is the purpose. We know this is the plan because this is our president. Herman Van Rompuy is the European Union president. He was appointed after the Lisbon Treaty was passed in 2009. His post, his job was created by the treaty, in fact. But there was no election. The people of Romania, the people of Great Britain, none of the 27 countries in the European Union had any say at all. We never got the chance to put a tick or a cross in a box to vote for or against him. He was appointed. The entire executive level of Europe is appointed. And they're above the law. The only semblance of an interview he had for the job that we know about was when he was interviewed at a dinner of the Bilderberg group, an elite circle of corporate interests under the control of multi-billionaire David Rockefeller from the United States. Its chairman at that time was an ex-farmer executive, Etienne Davignon. We didn't get the chance to vote for Van Rompuy. And if you don't get the chance to vote for somebody, it's only reasonable to label this as a dictatorial style of government. Of course, when people seize power in other countries and they are holding presidential office, executive office, without elections, the European Union is very quick to point its finger and to say, we call for free and fair elections as a matter of priority. Yeah? But if that's good enough for other countries, why not here? Why do we not have the choice, the chance to vote for the people at the executive level in Europe? What's good enough in far-off lands that our leaders point their fingers at must surely be good enough for here, isn't it? The battle for democracy in Europe has lasted for centuries. And it really, if you look back over European history, it's sort of unbelievable, really, isn't it? That we are still sitting here today talking about a lack of democracy. In so many ways, we consider ourselves to be a civilized people. But civilization surely depends upon true democracy being present. And, you know, the question is this the future? Is this what we are happy to live under? Are we happy to live under a dictatorial style of government that is beyond our reach and control? Surely a Europe that puts the people first has to be our goal. This has to be a better future for us all. So, the concluding part of my lecture tonight, I want to show you a few of the things that our foundation is doing in Europe to try to bring about positive improvements and a positive change to some of these things. The movement of life Virgil mentioned at the very beginning of this evening's talk. It was founded in March this year in Anaheim, in California, in the United States. It has the backing of some very important people. It has the backing of survivors from Auschwitz. A group of survivors who witnessed the crimes that people like Fritz Tamir committed and brought about at Auschwitz. They saw firsthand that the experiments carried out upon prisoners at Auschwitz were actually using drugs supplied by the drug companies that were part of the IG Farben cartel, which is another story again. So, the point of this, from now on, is that the movement of life is becoming the umbrella campaign under which all of the activities of our foundation will now be carried. It's a global campaign. We are gradually appointing coordinators in countries starting in Europe, and will move out of Europe in due course. But what we are trying to protect and trying to show people is that the most fundamental human rights are the rights to health and the rights to life. Because unless the rights to health and the rights to life are respected, no other rights are possible. Everything else has to come secondary to these. But our problem, as we stand here today, and I've tried to give you a little taste of this evening, is that these rights are being threatened by corporate cartels that see our bodies as their marketplace. To the drug cartel, the pharmaceutical drug cartel, our bodies are a marketplace for drugs. This is why we are told if our cholesterol is above a certain level. Our doctors are being taught that this is dangerous to our health and we need preventative drugs such as statins. We think our bodies are our own, and they are. They should be, but to these cartels we are simply a market. We are a market for products, patented products and profits. We will not get these rights voluntarily. No one's going to come to us and say, my goodness, we've been heading in the wrong direction, let's wipe the slate and start again. This is not going to happen. This is not going to happen unless we do something to bring about positive change. And this is the goal. The goal to defend these rights is the aim of the movement of life. This is what the homepage of the Movement of Life website looks like. There's a petition. I'd urge you to sign that. We're still in the process of setting up the websites for the individual countries. At the moment, they're divided into continents. And if you click on each continent, there's a set of sub-pages for each continent containing information that is relevant to that area. Very shortly, there'll be a page, when you click on Europe, there'll be an option for Romania, and there'll be material in the Romanian language, the means of contacting Virgil and our other coordinators. Our coordinators in Romania, these two ladies here, Elena and Joanna from Bucharest, and Virgil here from Timișoara. Virgil will be looking after Timișoara and the western region of Romania, and these two young ladies will look after Bucharest and the east. You can contact them at the moment by this email address, and I urge you to support Virgil. Very shortly, after the summer, there will be a meeting for those of you who want to work with us, and we'll discuss plans for how we intend to move with these campaigns in the future. What I'll do next, I'll give you a little idea of some of the campaigns now that form the movement of life, some of the key tasks that we have before us, some of the key goals, the starting points, if you like, for this campaign. Goal number one, really, has to be to bring the information about the roots of the European Union to as many people as possible. Because whilst other issues are important, GMOs are important, and, so is everything else, the natural health issues are terribly important. But unless we understand what it is that we're fighting against, unless we understand where it came from, we're always going to be less able to confront the issue and to deal with it properly. We have to understand where this structure came from, who benefits. It's not us, we know that now. But we believe that when this information is brought to sufficient numbers of people, we believe that we're already looking at the beginning of the end of the credibility for the EU as it is today. You can buy copies if you want of this book immediately after tonight, or if you want to, you can download it free from our website. We don't mind, it's up to you. We first published the book in English online just over a year ago, and at the time we didn't have any intention of producing hard copies. It was only when we started getting lots of inquiries via email, people saying, where can I buy this? I prefer to have a book that I can do this with, that we produced first of all an English version, then a Polish version, and now just very recently this version in the Romanian language. We'd urge you to help us spread this information, to distribute it to everybody that you know. Because what we do know is that around Europe it's becoming increasingly apparent that awareness is growing of these roots. A couple of months ago, somebody took this photograph at a demonstration in Greece. A demonstration against the financial situation in that country. To us, the fact that people are beginning to make this connection, this picture speaks really more than any words can do. But we can't ignore the health aspects. If you look back to the beginning of what I was saying this evening, people are largely being kept in ignorance about their health. We're not taught in schools about the way our bodies work, about the way in which our bodies depend upon nutrition to keep us healthy, and the way in which optimum nutrition can be used to improve our health when we fall sick. So a primary goal of the movement of life has to be to bring this information to people, to help people to remove the blindfold, if you like, that is keeping them ignorant about their health. There are 5 parts to this campaign, our World Health Alphabetization campaign. 5 goals, in fact. Goal number 1, I guess I just said it already, and it's to end global health illiteracy. And to do this by providing basic knowledge about the structure and function of the human body and the cellular origins of disease. The fact that disease starts at the cellular level, and if it's allowed to run unchecked, this is when problems appear with organs. But the message about the cellular origins of disease is key to this, because life-saving information about micronutrients and science-based natural health has to be brought to be available to everybody. This has to be the foundation of a safe and effective and affordable healthcare system. The problems with the global economy right now have shown us, if ever we needed to know, we can't afford a $1 trillion a year pharmaceutical industry. It's absurd that healthcare has reached a point where, in my country now, we're spending £100 billion a year on our national health service. That's about 400 billion lei, I think. You know, and a pharma industry earning $1 trillion a year. This is not the way forward, and we can't afford this. This is the time, then, to look to create something different. To build a new healthcare structure that's community-based and focuses on the prevention and the eradication of diseases. Because the pharmaceutical industry, despite what we might have been led to believe, it doesn't focus upon curing diseases. It focuses upon treating the symptoms of diseases. It focuses upon levels of cholesterol. It focuses upon treating